Okay, welcome to the second video. This one is about rocks and their erosion and how they affect the landscape. Knowing about how the landscape is formed is important because the shape of the landscape decides on what we can actually do with it. We also are the activities we have and carry out on the soil will also influence the shape of the landscape. So we need to know what should actually be happening according to nature, and then what influence our human activities are having, and whether this is a bad thing. Well, the main part of the landscape which influences its shape is the types of rocks that are found there. Because some of them erode faster than others, and some of them will break off in chunks easily, whereas some of them wear away through little particles coming off. So they've got all these different properties. Now, there are three main different types of rock. Firstly, you've got igneous rocks. Now, you probably know that, or might know that the Earth has a crust of rock on the outside, and then the further you go in, where the temperatures are extremely hot, the rock inside is of a liquid nature called magma. Now, when that bursts out in an eruption, that magma cools down, so it forms this type of rock that we call igneous. Examples are, you might have heard of graphite, something we use in pencils, and basalt. Now, just because there's no volcanoes around in the area now doesn't mean that there's no igneous rocks, because these eruptions could have occurred thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years ago. But if there has been eruptions there and the magma has now cooled down on the surface, that means you're going to have igneous rocks, which could then become buried over the years. The second type is what we call sedimentary. Sedimentary is influenced a lot by nature and animals, because what sedimentary is small particles, a lot of it as rock, settles gradually under water when rivers have eroded those particles away and washed them to these large bodies of water. The particles will sink down, and then the weight of the water will create large amounts of pressure that push down on the particles and cause them to form a rock. Now, why this is influenced a lot by living creatures is that a lot of sedimentary rock is quite often made up of shells of mollusks and sea creatures that also sinks down when those animals die, and it compresses it together. Limestone is a good example of sedimentary rock. Now, once again, remember that sedimentary rock now doesn't have to be underneath a body of water. The millions of years ago, when it was actually formed, it might have been under an ocean. Of course, the oceans change shape. The plates of rock that the crust is made of rise and drop, and the climate changes. So as a result, sedimentary rock can be found somewhere totally on land. The last type of rock is metamorphic, and with metamorphic, it's basically one of the other types of rocks that has changed its shape under the influence of usually very high pressures or other factors that have changed its structure altogether. An example of metamorphic would be marble or slate. Slate has got a very good, it doesn't erode very well, and hence it's used for roofs. And you probably know that marble is quite strong, as opposed to sedimentary rocks, which wear away very easily. Another example of metamorphic rock is schist, which is actually a sedimentary rock that has changed its shape and become metamorphic. So those are your three main types of rock. Now, you've also got then we need to know, what affects these rocks, what changes their shape, what erodes them. Well, you've got basic factors such as rain, river water, air, gravity, all these things will wear particles away from the rocks, cause them to break or what have you, and that's changed their shape and changed the shape of the land. But also you've got a few other important processes. There's one called freeze-thaw weathering, where the rainwater gets washed into small cracks in the stone. Now what's going to happen is if it freezes quickly, water has a very special property in that frozen in the solid form, it's got a bigger volume than in this liquid form. So that water expands in the crack and will weaken it slightly, widen it. Now this might even be only be the smallest, slightest amount, you know, not visual enough for us to see with the naked eye until much later in its stages. But this happens continuously a number of times throughout the year, and then over hundreds of years, thousands of years, what's going to happen is those cracks are going to open up, and eventually chunks of the rock are going to fall off, pieces, particles, and again that's causing the erosion of the rock. An example of a special erosion of limestone, the sedimentary rock, is the way in which it reacts with carbon dioxide in the air. Limestone, the chemical name for it is calcium carbonate. Now, calcium carbonate will react with carbon dioxide in the air, and that forms a substance called carbonic acid. It's complicated with all these names, but just think the calcium carbonate, I think calcium is like a white substance, like in milk, and limestone is white. So calcium carbonate reacts with the carbon dioxide, forming carbonic acid, carbonic acid, and then that will react with the original calcium carbonate, forming calcium bicarbonate. Now why calcium bicarbonate is so important is that it's soluble. So when water runs over the calcium bicarbonate, that calcium bicarbonate will be washed away. It'll dissolve into the water, the rainwater, as it splashes over it, and be washed away. And so as a result, the limestone wears away. So that's the main two natural influences, and all the others, as I said, with the small frictions of wind, etc. But also then, of course, you have human effects on erosion, where pollution can erode rocks, and the way in which we affect them. So pollution, for instance, promotes carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from exhaust fumes and industry and burning fossil fuels. So that's going to affect limestone a great deal, increasing that process that I just described. So that's a bit about the different types of rock and how their shape is changed. The next video we'll have a look at how valleys are formed and how humans influence the landscape.